Hello everybody, I look the way that I do because instead of making a video, I've decided to paint a horse. I am very glad that I've done that. Anyway, now it's actually too close to when I'll have to go and meet other people, and if I've put on makeup now, it actually won't fully wash off and I will look like a clown, so I can't actually do that. But in the in the theme of the video, that will be a right way of putting it. I've decided to hang the biggest stone that I have out of my stone collection on my, well, chest? On my neck, probably. I mean, that's where the chain is, but this thing hangs kind of lower. I also have like a giant amber, but that one hangs so low that it would actually be hard for you to see. It's on a very long chain. So then, today we are talking about gargoyles, which normally are imagined of being quite kind of stone creatures, and that's kind of the idea that you would get from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, from that one gargoyle that you get to fight, but it's not quite that. They can turn into stone, they can pass through stone, and there's different conditions under which they become stone, but in Vampire the Masquerade, they're very much flesh. And another little fun fact is that gargoyles are actually a legitimate bloodline because gargoyles can embrace people into gargoyles. Like, they can directly pass on everything about being a gargoyle and make another gargoyle without external intervention, and honestly, I found that very interesting. So, to quickly sum up the history of gargoyles, gargoyles were first created by Tremere, which is another clan in Vampire the Masquerade, in either 1167 or 1121st year. The sources kind of vary, and they did this through ritual. Effectively, they wanted an easy to control but hard to assault and kill a home guardian, warrior, and a scout. So they even divided their gargoyles into those different categories. They did piss off quite a few clans by making gargoyles, mostly because they made gargoyles out of Simites, Gangrel, and Nosferatu. Different gargoyles required kind of a different combination of the clans, but to make a gargoyle, it is implied that some members of these clans kind of have to go missing, and it's hard to figure out whether or not Tremere used one of an already vampire person as like a template for a gargoyle and then just combined it with ritual work and other blood, or whether they took mortal people and just drained dry the other clans and combined all that blood with a mortal, and that's how they got a gargoyle. I am pretty sure that they actually directly used a vampire. So like they would kidnap the vampire and they would turn a vampire into a gargoyle, and because the transformation is just so potent, it involves magic, it involves several different types of blood that you're mixing, the gargoyle that you make actually does not retain their past memories, because that kind of gets wiped in the process of all of that magic and blood just really assaulting their body that badly. If a gargoyle embraces another gargoyle and makes a gargoyle like that, that gargoyle can retain some memories, some hazy memories, but because gargoyles are just so explicitly magical and supernatural, a lot of what made a person before they got transformed into a gargoyle still goes. So like they have vague recollection of who they were if they're turned by a gargoyle into a gargoyle, but it's only a vague recollection. And if like a Tremere does it, then there's absolutely no recollection, no old loyalties. That person is effectively gone. you now have an entirely new gargoyle. Not surprisingly, gargoyles did not super dig being a slave. So at about mid-1400s, they revolted. In 1489, Clan Tremere has outlawed making new gargoyles, but it wasn't quite for the sake of the gargoyle revolt. It was more because, well, other clans were super mad with them, and they kind of needed the other clans to not be super mad with them, so they were like, we're gonna be good guys, we're gonna be good boys, and we're gonna stop stealing your members and turning them into gargoyles. How about that? We pinky promise, we pinky swear. So some gargoyles might have happened after that point, but the punishment is that you're given as a Tremere to either Nosferatu, Gangrel, or Simitz if you break the rule of not making a gargoyle. So whichever person you kidnapped and turned into a gargoyle, if it is found out past this point, then your clan effectively just like takes you and hands over to the party that had the damages done to them and be like, do with them whatever you want. Like, that is the agreement. Now that is on you, buddy. But you know how it is. Just don't get caught and everything's okay. But it's not allowed. It's not allowed. So technically, new gargoyles from Tremere were not supposed to be made after 1489. The Gargoyle Revolt ended at 1497, and a lot of gargoyles went free. So they're free citizens of the world. They can do whatever they want. Some of them still stuck and continued serving Tremere voluntarily because, well, that's kind of the life that they knew. So then, gargoyles used to come in 3 varieties when they were made by the Tremere. There were scout gargoyles made from Gangrel Nosferatu. They were meant to observe Tremere's enemies, and if I remember correctly, they would turn to stone if heavily damaged so that Tremere can just retrieve them instead of like losing the whole person in case the scout gets, caught. So once again, they're normally flesh, but they get to turn into stone if emergency demands it. And their disciplines used to be Auspex, which is the ability to see things, including the invisible, Flight, and Obfuscate, which is the ability to turn invisible. They would have Sentinels. Sentinels were meant to protect territory, and Sentinels were mostly made from Nosferatu and Simitz. So those were important parts of making a Sentinel. A Sentinel could fly. They had Fortitude, which is very thick skin, and Potence, which is they could hit hard. When Sentinel is entirely alone without any person to trust, they find themselves confused and their dice pools are halved. So it is kind of the gargoyle that's meant to live with you inside your home and protect your home. But if you're not there and if they're there alone and they have to make decisions, that's not going to go down very well because they find that hard to do. That wasn't what they were meant for. And warriors were effectively foot soldiers, the attack force of the Tremere. They were supposed to look intimidating, they were supposed to be aggressive, and, they were supposed to fight Tremere's wars for them. So warriors were made from Gangrel Simitzi, and their disciplines were Flight, which is the ability to fly, Fortitude, which is thick skin, and Protean, which is ability to transform. So they could grow claws, they could turn into mist, all of that. Very, very nice things. So now if a warrior gargoyle would frenzy, a part of their body would turn to stone. doing any activities associating with that body part is an automatic failure until the next evening, but obviously it's also thicker and harder to penetrate. Now, mind you, free gargoyles kind of lose the distinction between what they were, because they're free, and they gain new disciplines that they developed in clan. So all gargoyles should have access to fortitude and potence in theory, but they also have visceratica. Visceratica. It's a hard word to pronounce, which allows them to do a lot of stone shit and detection shit. Like, for example, the abilities that they have is blending into your surroundings with Skin of Chameleon, or detecting all others within an enclosed area the size of a large apartment. Now, the ability to detect others kinda increases as you level that skill up, so detecting everyone inside a structure, detecting everyone inside an entire building, even if it's like an entire apartment building, partially merging into stone or cement, hardening your skin to absorb damage, hardening your skin to reduce damage to a point where you're also deadening pain, and even fire damage is halved, passing through stone and cement entirely. And then there's advanced powers, which is only gargoyles of very low generation would have access to, so mostly not players, though players wouldn't normally play gargoyles, but you totally can. Like, that is totally, absolutely an option. So, in advanced powers section, something that most players won't have access to, we have things like a dark statue, where you're physically unaffected by sunlight as long as you do not move. But you still have to roll to avoid the fear of sunlight, otherwise you kind of will run away screaming and this whole thing will fail. And you do have to have fortitude leveled, so you can't just like have no dots in it. Or rock heart, similar to stone strength, your innards also calcify, not only your flesh that hardens, reducing piercing damage and making staking almost impossible. And at level 7, which is very, very, very few gargoyles is gonna have this, because once again, advanced powers is not something that players normally have. Crawling chamber. You may animate, give a limited sentience to, and command to an extent, a 10 square foot volume of stone. So, you know, stony boys. The other thing that all gargoyles have is flight, which is technically a magical power, but the gargoyle believes that they're supposed to be able to do this regardless of the fact that actually they're too heavy to stay afloat. So it is magic that they're activating with flight, but they don't believe that it is magic. They believe that it's just an innate ability that all gargoyles are supposed to possess. So that's kind of fun. At first thought, the vampire cannot actually fly, but can soar like a hang glider, and they can't carry anything in their hands because they need their own hands for steering. Their maximum speed is equal to prevailing winds, or 15 miles / 25 kilometers per hour in calm air. Now, the more you level, the more weight you can carry with yourself while flying. So that starts at like 20 pounds / 10 kilos, then it increases to 50 pounds / 25 kilos, and increases to 100 pounds / 45 kilos, and so on and so forth. And your maximum speed also increases at how well you can fly. It is effectively the ability of flying. Yeah. Now, when it comes to free gargoyles, because they were created as a slave race and they were supposed to be social and have masters, gargoyles have really, like, carried over that social part, so they do have a lot of care for one another. And when there is a new gargoyle that's joining in, either because they are freshly escaped, because they were still serving their masters after that long, or because they were freshly embraced and made gargoyle, all gargoyles kind of pitch in to teaching the new gargoyle to make sure that they don't violate the masquerade, that they know how to survive in the current environment, and so that they can gargoyle well. And well, they kind of need some level of socializing. So gargoyles are not really lone wolves as such. Gargoyles are more communal, and they will normally either live in the havens with their masters, or gargoyles that are free will often make communal havens with each other rather than just sleep and live alone. And if they live with their masters, they will stay wherever their masters allow them, be it closets, basements, crypts, or cells. Free gargoyles, though, have a particular preference for sleeping high up, mainly because they're very flight-oriented and they do enjoy that. So bell towers, high rises, they make for great places. Like if you could make a shack on like a rooftop on like a huge apartment building, the gargoyle would be like, this is fantastic, this is great, I love this. They like high places, is what I'm trying to say. Now, considering free gargoyles can make other people into gargoyles, and considering that each clan tends to prefer a specific type of person for making into, part of their vampire family, what would gargoyles prefer? Well, apparently it's just gut feeling or obsession. So whatever person the gargoyle ends up really liking is the person that they're likely to make into a gargoyle. And that can happen for absolutely no reason at all. Just gargoyle really fancies you. They just think that you're awesome. They really like you as a person. They probably stalked you around for a while. They want to be near, so they kidnap and make you into a gargoyle. And, I mean, you do lose your memories, so that's not great. You're probably a slightly different person when you're a gargoyle than whatever you were before, but that is just how gargoyles operate. Gargoyles also tend to have a lot more weaknesses than other bloodlines. First, they're hideous to look at, mostly because of the base vampires that were chosen to be made into a gargoyle, so it's like a combination of Nosferatu, Gangrel, and Simis. So those types of vampires already had like some issues with looks, so you don't get a lot of like look points as a gargoyle, and your appearance immediately violates the masquerade by just being seen by mortals, because I mean, come on. This is a good illustration of what a gargoyle is, and this is like directly from Vampire the Masquerade wiki, so it is accurate to the setting. Come on, you're not gonna mistake that for a human. Like, there is no way you would ever mistake a gargoyle for anything that isn't a gargoyle. So like, normally it's ideal if gargoyles don't get seen. Gargoyles are highly susceptible to mind control of any source, and this weakness is intentional because Tremere wanted them to be easy to influence. Now, in the 20th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, the appearance flaw is replaced with halved dice pool if a gargoyle lacks any mutual connections to other individuals, because it would be hard for them to exist as a gargoyle on their own, but they're no longer considered hideous. So, I suppose beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If you would tap that, you would tap that, and nobody can stop you in that regard. So, this would be about the extent of where gargoyles go. Now, mind you, there are other kind of monsters that get constructed by vampires in order to protect their shit, protect their havens, and in general fight wars for them. It's just that they're no longer called gargoyles and they're no longer made from these very specific vampires. In general, kidnapping other vampires to turn them into your personal slaves is kind of looked down upon practice, I would say, unless you're at Tzimitzi, in which case kidnapping stray vampires and turning them into furniture is a-okay, because that's just part of your culture, I guess. But yeah, so new gargoyles are not really being made by vampires, but gargoyles can very much make more gargoyles by themselves, and if you're not gonna like incorporate the fact that if you're made into a gargoyle, you kind of lose majority of your memory, then I would say these are very pleasant chaps. They're more like a wild type of vampire, I guess. Like they're not really participating in politics, they just like to live free, and I suppose they enjoy flying and stuff like that, and they like having their own communities. They need to socialize, they need to keep bonds going. That is important for a gargoyle, especially because some of them couldn't even like think very well on their own due to the way that they were created. So like it's kind of, you know, understandable that they need bonds with some sort of social community. They're kind of outsiders to the rest of the vampire community, so they mostly stick together. But honestly, they're kind of cool and they're kind of nice, outside of the fact that if a gargoyle gets obsessed with you, they will steal you and make you into a gargoyle, and you're gonna lose majority of your memories in the process. Like that is the point. That's kind of like, yeah, not very nice, but not outside of what some other vampires do either. So like, it's not the worst as far as Vampire the Masquerade goes. Honestly, I would say that these guys are very playable as a written character, and I would say that they're even very playable in a regular vampire campaign. They wouldn't be very hard to write in, especially if you write in that the other players with you are your friends and are your connections, and because you're a very social creature, you would want to stick with them, honestly. So, like, as long as maybe they're not Tremere, you might not even be that opposed to them being other types of vampire. You would probably be up for some jolly cooperation. It's just that normally you don't really see people playing gargoyles, and honestly, I didn't know much about gargoyles outside of the fact that they were made as Tremere, as their own personal slaves, because I never looked into it. Like, it's not really considered like a clan, it's not really. It is considered a bloodline, but you don't end up thinking about them as a bloodline, you end up thinking of them as like a thing. Like, an automaton, a sentinel, something that's there to like protect the haven. You don't think, oh yes, this is totally a bloodline that I could play. And when you read into them, it is totally a bloodline that you could play. And that is like blowing my mind right now. Like, and unlike some other bloodlines that I covered, once again, they wouldn't even be hard to be put into a party. Because they have those things of like, they want to develop social connections and they do want to trust people in general. So it wouldn't be that hard. And the fact that gargoyles can make other gargoyles as well. So unlike blood brothers and blood sisters that have a true issue replicating themselves, gargoyles have no issue replicating themselves. They are an actual self-sustained thing. And before I did work for this video, I never knew that, and honestly, it's very fascinating for me. So have you ever played a gargoyle? And would you consider playing a gargoyle now? Because you know what, I would. I actually think that they would be fun. maybe not for like a very, very long campaign, but I would say if you like know that you're doing like a specific module or like, I don't know, you're like, we're doing a campaign that's gonna last like 20 sessions and then it's ending. That's where my character stops. Putting a gargoyle there would be a lot of fun because while they're not really involved in a lot of politics of vampires, they are practically not involved in politics of vampires at all, they would be up for some jolly cooperation and they would be up for having connections. So they would perfectly just kind of slide into the party without any issue. Unlike some bloodlines that I've covered before, like playing a Kiesid in a party would be very, very hard. Playing a Gargoyle in a party would not even be an inconvenience. The only reason why you may have problems is if they have a grudge against Tremere, or like they remember things to do with Tremere and somebody's playing a Tremere in your party, but even that might be fun. And lads and lasses, thank you so much for watching these series to this point. It is where it ends now. Like the whole thing. When I went out, I wanted to cover clans, and with some clans I didn't do the best job. I tried to do as good of a job as I could, but I remember, I think it was for Gangrel, where I mixed up a definition of an ability. I later on corrected that. I mixed up what, like, a... I remember that one user messaged me, so let me just read it. I have been following up your series of Vampire the Masquerade clans. I have done one in my YouTube in the past about clans and their powers mechanisms, but my followers asked me to talk about their lore, so I'm doing some research and listening to other people. One thing is, in the Ventru video you mentioned about botching a roll. You were right if you considered V3, V20 rolls, but if you're speaking of V5 compulsion rolls, and the way to roll is significantly different. 10 and 1 doesn't offset themselves anymore in V5, and the compulsion is only triggered if you fail a roll, with a 1 in a hunger dice. Not necessarily you have to botch it. If the difficulty is 4 successes and you fail, 3 successes or less, with a 1 in hunger dice, the compulsion should be triggered. In V5, a botch is essentially a total failure mechanic. Paragraph from the book below. So thank you so much, Furnace, for sending this in. I wonder if he's gonna watch it, because honestly he wrote this to me a month ago and I never replied. I probably should, but I am terrible at replying to messages, guys. But what I mean is, I made mistakes making this series. I tried my best, but when I'm making these series, it literally came from like a place of love. I wanted to do a homage to the tabletop series that I really, really enjoyed playing. And I still do, but most groups that I've been in have fallen off due to real life reasons. So currently I'm only playing one game, and that game is like once a month. So I am currently playing it very casually. I wanted to do this because I wanted to share my love for the series, but I also acknowledge that I might not be the best person to do this and that I made mistakes doing this early on, which probably got a lot of people very angry with me. And I didn't want to make a separate video about this, but I do apologize if you're one of those people. If you're somebody that has stuck through the whole series, thank you so much. I'm gonna take a break from talking about tabletop stuff and especially mechanically heavily stuff, because my brain is just not the best filter for it. There are people that are so much better at this stuff than I am, but I never pretended to be the best person at this. I wanted to express the love that I felt for a tabletop that I enjoy playing very much with other people, and this was the best way that I could honestly handle it. I'm gonna be playing RuneScape now in this slot. And if things go well, I'm planning to do that for 4 years straight. As if I make one video a week, and if I explore one quest a video, considering that I'm tackling old school RuneScape, whose quests don't get updated super a lot, it would take me about, on average, 4 years to get through all of the quests. So while I am not I'm not considering coming back to Vampire the Masquerade, especially the tabletop stuff, and talking about maybe notable characters or factions or other kind of things that I love about the game. For the time being, I'm gonna be taking a very, very long break from it. In fact, the break will likely be years. Provided that my health holds and I'm still alive, I am not putting out of consideration just like continuing this 4 years on. This channel has so far been running for like 15, 16 years, so saying I might resume this after 4 years doesn't even sound alien to me. But I will absolutely understand if you were only here for Vampire the Masquerade, if you're gonna unsubscribe. In that case, thank you so much for being with me through the series. If you want, you can stay and venture into RuneScape with me. I think it's gonna be a very fun endeavor because while I am gonna be putting restrictions on myself, I'm not gonna be putting any kind of very fatalistic restrictions on myself, which means that if I am desperately lost, I can look up stuff, and because I am doing quests, and quests are already pre-written and on the screen, I would probably make a lot less mistakes than in these videos. Once again, I'm so sorry for any of the mistakes that I made so far. Thank you so much for all the people that have called out my mistakes. So I hope I get to see you then. If not, then I fully understand. Thank you so much for watching this series, for being with me through this series. The playlist for the whole series is in the description down below, so if you haven't watched the other videos, you can go and take a look-see. Thank you so much for my Patreon supporters that have been here and supporting my channel no matter what I do pretty much, and that allow me to make videos such as these. And hopefully I'm gonna see you in my other videos. Toodaloo for now.